Hey, what's up everyone? John here from testprepinsight.com, and today I'm going to be comparing the language apps from SpanishPod101 and Duolingo. We just finished using SpanishPod101 for a few months and just published our review on it, and everyone always wants to know how a language program compares against Duolingo, since it's the biggest, most popular program in the world, so that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to compare these two apps side by side, and I'll let you know which language program I see as being better. And by the way, I should just mention up front here that since I'll just be focusing on higher level points in this video, if you find you need more detail at any point, you can always check out our full detailed written comparison of these two apps over on our website. An easy way to get there is just to Google Test Prep Insight, SpanishPod101 versus Duolingo. It's a quick way to find it. Okay, so before we dive straight into my thoughts on each app, I want to provide a high-level overview of how each language program works. This will help to provide some context. So let's start with SpanishPod101. In terms of program organization, SpanishPod101 revolves around what they call pathways. It's a fancy name, but these are just really collections of lessons. And when you land on the SpanishPod101 dashboard, they'll assign you a recommended pathway based on your learning level, usually the level 1 Spanish pathway if you're a newbie. These lessons are all lined up in a nice, easy to follow little path which you work one at a time with a quiz or assessment every few lessons. Now to be clear, you don't have to follow the company's recommended pathway. You can jump around and pick your own, but I'd suggest sticking to the recommended pathways. But as for what the lessons themselves are actually like within these pathways, the backbone of this program is podcast-like audio lessons. Not super surprising given the name of the app is Spanish Pod. But in any event, these podcast-style lessons are anywhere from 2 to 20 minutes long, depending on the topic and your learning level, but the majority fall in the 6 to 10 minute range. Plus, while the audio plays, below the controls, you can review the dialogue from the underlying conversation, the target vocab, the lesson notes, grammar explanations, and a full word-for-word transcript of the lesson. That way, if you miss something the hosts say, you can quickly find it on screen. And they all generally follow the same pattern. Two hosts will introduce themselves and the topic of the lesson. They'll then have a short dialogue in Spanish, followed by a slower version of the same conversation, then a breakdown of that dialogue in English. Then following this, the host will introduce and discuss any relevant grammar or culture insights related to the topic at hand. And lastly, they'll finish up with a quick recap and review of the vocab in the lesson. Plus, following the lesson, you can take a short quiz to test yourself. Now, there are some short video-based lessons in the Spanish Pod program as well, but generally speaking, there's far fewer of these, and honestly, between the two formats, it's clear that the audio lessons are really the company's bread and butter. There's just way more pathways with audio lessons, and they're generally speaking better produced. But anyway, that's the essence of the SpanishPod101 program, podcast-style audio lessons. Now, Duolingo, on the other hand, takes a pretty different approach to teaching. They also use a learning path with lessons on it for organizing their materials, but rather than using audio or video as the basis of their lessons, the Duolingo lessons focus on short-form, hands-on exercises. The typical Duolingo lesson takes just 5 minutes and is essentially a set of rapid-fire drills, such as listening drills, fill in the blanks, matching pairs, verbal practice, and writing full sentences, among some others. Their lessons go by very fast, and a lot of times you'll end up doing 2 or 3 Duolingo lessons in the time you would do one SpanishPod101 lesson. So in essence, Duolingo's lessons focus much more on gamey, interactive drills. In this way, the lessons from both companies are almost opposites of each other. But to be fair, that's also not the whole picture, because Duolingo's program is also fundamentally different from SpanishPod101's. And that's because Duolingo isn't just about lessons. Their program is also meant to be like a game or social app. With Duolingo, you connect socially with friends, earn XP points, keep your streak going, compete in leagues against other users, and buy things from the store with gems. It's much more game-like and social than SpanishPod101's program. But from a high level, that's how the two apps generally compare. Just stepping back and recapping, the key takeaway here is that the SpanishPod101 lessons place a very strong emphasis on developing your listening skills with their podcast-like audio lessons, while the Duolingo lessons are much shorter and intended to be more like a fun game or social app. And by the way, if you want to see some examples of the lessons or drills from both companies, make sure to check out that full detailed written comparison that I mentioned earlier. I'll have it linked down below in the description for you. I have screenshots and examples over there so you can get a better feel for what to expect. Okay, so before we jump straight into talking about what I like and don't like about each app, let's quickly talk about cost. So almost everyone knows that Duolingo has a free version. Their basic subscription doesn't cost a cent. You just download the app, make a profile, and start doing lessons. And you get most of the benefits they have to offer. And I say most because there are some negatives. The problem with the free version is that there's a bunch of ads in the program, you're limited on how many mistakes you can make on a daily basis, and navigating new and old lessons is somewhat restrictive. So if you want to upgrade to get rid of those negatives, you can upgrade to Super Duolingo. That's their premium version. It costs $84 for an annual subscription. That's about $7 on a monthly basis, or they have a family plan if you want to split with friends or family. That costs $120 per year, or $10 on a monthly basis if you want to look at it that way. Now, SpanishPod 101 has 3 different subscription levels: Basic, Premium, and Premium Plus. These plans range from $4 per month on the low end for the basic plan, up to $47 per month on the high end for the Premium Plus plan. The basic plan includes access to all of the audio and video lessons. The Premium plan gives you the same lessons plus additional features like flashcards, word banks, vocab lists, and audio dialogues. And then the Premium Plus plan includes one-on-one access to a Spanish teacher and hand-graded assessments. So all in all, sort of your standard good, better, best offering. Now, stepping back and comparing the two, SpanishPod's basic plan is cheaper than Super Duolingo, while its premium plan is basically the same price, and the Premium Plus plan is much more expensive. So it really just all depends on which SpanishPod 101 plan you need and how long you want to pay for in advance with that. But I would just say, generally speaking, if you're going with the standard premium plan and sign up for a year like you would have to with Duolingo, it's essentially a wash. However, one thing I'll say here is that while Duolingo isn't big on discounts, SpanishPod 101 does seem to regularly offer sales and special promos, and you can usually lock in a lower rate. So do make sure to look for coupon codes if you decide to go with them. I'll actually do my best to keep the description down below updated with the most current coupon codes that I can find floating around out there, so give that text below the video screen a good look before buying. In my experience, you can almost always find a code to save yourself 25% off full retail with SpanishPod 101 packages, if not more. Alright, so now that we've covered cost and you've heard how each program works, let's get into where I see each program beating the other. And let's start with SpanishPod 101. And the first major win for them has to be their podcast-style audio lessons. They are simply awesome, and I think they're the real highlight of the SpanishPod program. Not only is the content within the lessons on point, but the rotating team of hosts are super engaging and fun. These are unlike any of the other audio lessons I've reviewed from other companies, and they are legitimately entertaining. The hosts tell stories, crack jokes, and even weave pop culture into the lessons. They just keep things light and fun, and it didn't even feel like I was there to learn something. Then, the next advantage for SpanishPod 101 over Duolingo is the variety of their lesson content. Not only do you get the option of how you want to consume your content with either audio or video lessons, but there's also a ton of diversity within the lesson pathways. Just for example, if you're learning Spanish because you plan on taking a trip or moving to Costa Rica, in that case, you can take a course that's all about Costa Rican Spanish. And even within that course, there's a bunch of variety. Basically, SpanishPod 101 offers learners a ton of different options based on your learning level, preferred learning format, and personal interests or goals. It's really cool. Then, the third highlight here is how SpanishPod 101 integrates grammar into their lessons. In my opinion, it's a pretty effective framework. During the audio lessons, there's a dedicated part of every lesson where the host will stop to explain grammar rules and principles from the underlying dialogue in a very natural and high-level way. And then if you do want more detail, you can always jump down to the lesson notes section for a more thorough explanation. This is in stark contrast to Duolingo, which I've always knocked for being weak on grammar. They just give you a little grammar guidebook at the start of each unit, which is very cursory and superficial. It's a major weakness in their program. And lastly, something I want to call out for SpanishPod 101 real quick because I didn't have a chance to mention it in the program overview is how they give you some nice bonus learning tools, including things like spaced repetition flashcards, core vocab lists, word banks, key phrases, and assessments. These tools aren't off the charts amazing, but they do make the program feel more well-rounded and offer a chance to drill on some of the stuff you've learned in the lessons, which I really like. Okay, so that's what I like about SpanishPod 101's program over Duolingo. So now let's get to my advantages for Duolingo. But before I get to that, I do just want to mention that every single month here at Test Prep Insight, we actually give away a free language learning course to one lucky person. Super simple to enter. Everyone out there is eligible. I'll put all the details down below in the description on how to get entered, but just know it takes like 10 seconds and hey, you never know. You could win a free lifetime subscription to Duolingo or SpanishPod 101. Okay, so Duolingo. And my first advantage for them is how they gamify language learning. Rather than making the learning experience like an academic type activity, they've designed their app to make things fun. And it legitimately is. It's even kind of addicting. It's got this adventure game-like feel and you get sucked in. You earn XP points with every lesson, you can do quests with friends, you can spend gems you earn on new features, you compete in leagues against other users, they nag you about keeping up your daily streak. It's just a really fun, motivating environment for learning, and I love that about Duolingo. Then, number 2, I actually like how Duolingo has integrated a review function into their program through practice sessions. Basically, every few stepping stones on the path, Duolingo will have a group of practice lessons. These lessons cover vocabulary from old lessons, so they sort of act like a recap and give you spaced review on previously learned items. Now, some people might not like this because these stepping stones do contribute to the Duolingo program, making it feel a little bit more repetitive. That's been one of the biggest knocks on Duolingo since their major update. But repetitiveness aside, I really like this natural review function that they've built into the program. It's just really effective for internalizing new vocab. All right, and my last one for Duolingo is how short their lessons are. The Duolingo lessons are just ultra bite-sized. The average lesson takes less than 5 minutes, and honestly, a lot of times if you're moving, you can finish one in under 3 minutes. It's just really easy to rip off quick study sessions with Duolingo because the lessons are chunked out into bite-sized pieces. For busy, on-the-go people or those who don't have time to kick back for 30 minutes at a time for a lesson, they are great. But anyway, that about does it for the detail in this comparison, so let's get to my final thoughts. Should you choose SpanishPod 101 or Duolingo to learn Spanish? Honestly, I like Duolingo for what it is, but SpanishPod 101 is a much more effective learning platform. Duolingo is great for having fun and learning some basics, but in terms of developing your ear for Spanish and learning to speak, I have to give the edge to SpanishPod here. Their podcast-style audio lessons are super engaging and effective, the short videos are helpful for visual learners, and the other little tools that they provide are great. So if you're serious about getting to an intermediate level of fluency, that's who I would go with. But anyway, that's all I've got for you. I hope this video has been helpful and you learned a little something about both of these companies. If so, make sure to return the favor by subscribing to our channel, liking this video, and dropping me a quick comment below. That would be really appreciated. And again, if you want to see that full detailed written comparison that I mentioned earlier in this video, just hop on over to our website, testprepinsight.com, or check out the other videos on our YouTube channel. We got a bunch of great content out there. But as always, thanks for watching, best of luck, and I'll see you in the next one.